So John, we're talking about Mary Beth Meehan's portraits, large-scale portraits, 17 of them down in Newnan. Now you teach art at University of West Georgia, but you also live in Newnan. So I take it that you come across these every so often. What's that experience like?
It's quite lovely. You drive into downtown Newnan, you can from various directions, and you'll see these images on the side of a wall. You'll see them maybe up above a window front, and they're quite arresting because some of them are very, very large. I would say upwards of 30 feet in height to probably roughly 20 feet, about 20 feet in width. And they're all in color. They're beautifully lit images with natural light, and they are just really quite stunning portraits of people who do live here in Newnan.
Yeah, Mary Beth is a twice nominated Pulitzer Prize photographer. And this series, I think, is kind of fascinating to see these portraits of everyday folk in Newnan, some of whom I've been able to meet, blown up to the size of, say, a billboard, right? Where we normally see sports stars and movie stars and people selling things. And now all of a sudden you're seeing people you live right next to, and their portrait is emblazoned on the side of a building and 30 feet tall. That's got to be a striking kind of, I don't know, way of experiencing the city and the people you live with.
It is, and I think that what it does is it highlights some of the power that's found in photography. I speak often with my students about the importance of photography as it relates to portraiture. If we think about portraiture as, its traditional roles, and why it really was one to kind of highlight power, ultimately. If you think about painting and things of that nature. And once photography was developed, no puns intended, we actually start seeing, photographs of our families. I often talk to my students and share with them, what your grandparents look like, most likely. You know what your great-grandparents look like, most likely. And this is an artifact, at times because of photography. And I think that bringing it back to Mary Beth Meehan's work, looking at and seeing, like you said, everyday people blown up in these really large scale images, it gives them a certain power that I think is undeniable. And I think that that's really kind of interesting because it is about representation and showing. And I think that that's one of the things that really makes photography so relevant today.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that this idea of photography is about power, and there was quite a bit of, well, not quite a bit, but there was some controversy with it, and we made it in the New York Times. This is the project that the University of West Georgia School of the Arts did in collaboration with the Newnan Art Res. And there was some pushback, and I think it comes back to that point you were talking about, that photography is representation, but who has the power to represent?
Exactly.
And when we look on these portraits, are we saying that's not an accurate representation of what I believe Newnan to be? Then you've got tension and conflict, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that photography, and I think that speaks to the idea of truth, and what is truth. When you have someone look at an image of, a person on the side of a building, two sisters, in particular, and they're saying, well, that's not my truth. Well, what does that mean? Why do you find this, why is this an issue or, objectionable to you? And I think that photography, there is an evidentiary power that has been associated to it since the very beginning. Fox Talbot talks about in his book, The Pencil of Nature, how photography can be used to document and keep track of things for insurance purposes even. So thinking about evidence in photography, it is interesting to think about, why these images that are really lovely, simple portraits, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way when I say simple, but just very simple, wonderful portraits did cause such a stir, at least in the very beginning.
Yeah. Well, they're coming down soon, and so it's great time to get to talk to you about the power of the images, and then more generally about the power of photography, and especially as it pertains to a community like Newnan, where you're currently living.
Yeah, and thank you for inviting me, by the way. I do appreciate that. You know, photography, I think, sits at the intersection of so many disciplines. And I think that's one of the reasons, again, this idea of power is so important. You know, photography is used in the sciences. It can be used in philosophy, religion. It's really at the intersection of so many different disciplines. And it comments so eloquently to ideas that people want to talk about and share. You know, I talk to often my students about it being a visual language and a silent language, you know, in that it creates narratives, both explicit and implicit. And I think that that's one of the things that is really valuable about the medium.
I appreciate it, John. Thanks a lot.
You're very welcome.